That's the show you were just watching.
The graphics are still
We'll catch you tomorrow. I'm Blake Berman. Have a great show.
See you, buddy.
Yep.
All right, we start with breaking news at 7 o'clock. Donald Trump is still on the stump in, of all places, Harlem, talking to a raucous crowd there. The Trump campaign says it is 30,000 people in Harlem. Donald Trump, of course, will not win New York City and likely won't win New York State. But the crowds and the location say everything about the state of the presidential race, the state of race relations in America, and the state of American culture as it is. With that, we welcome you to the fairest show on television. We keep looking at that picture. Joe Biden won the Bronx, if we split the Bronx out, in 2020. With 84% of the vote. It's about 60% Hispanic, 29% black. It is working class America. And that's really where we're seeing the divide in America now, right? It's not along racial lines. It is around class lines. So we welcome you to the fairest show on television on this Thursday night before Memorial Day weekend. You might call this, and it's how it's breaking out, the economy versus the abortion election. We said that 6 weeks ago. Now other people are paying attention and framing it the same way. We're listening to Mr. Trump, and we'll see if he says anything newsworthy. A lot of times at these rallies, he says something so off message, so outrageous, so bizarre, it becomes the story. And that is part of his problem. It may be his only problem between now and November. But think about what I said off the top. On its face, this is an economy versus abortion election. Neither candidate really inspires many Americans, so it's about what people fear the most. Here's MSNBC's breakdown of swing states.
You know, look, we've seen in the past, Mika, that candidates who are seen as maybe not as strong on the economy ultimately win an election, like, say, Barack Obama in 2012. But to be losing by this margin, that is unsustainable at this point for an incumbent.
All right, we'll spare you the polling data, but the Cook Political Report, which is nonpartisan, but if anything, it leans left. It makes it really clear. Voters fear Biden on the economy more than they fear Trump on abortion. It's that simple. So if you think about what's happening in the Bronx right now, these are reliably blue voters. They're minorities who are now so upset with the economy, and a lot of them will tell you they're so upset over immigration and the border, which plays into the economy, that they might vote for Donald Trump. Trump of all people. Here is Joe Biden's ad in response.
Of course I hate these people.
Donald Trump disrespecting black folk is nothing new. He was sued for refusing to rent his apartments to black families and called for the execution of 5 innocent black and brown teenagers.
And it's more than anger, it's hatred.
It's why Trump stood with violent white supremacists, warned of a bloodbath if he loses the next election, and if he's president again, vowed to be a dictator who wants revenge on his enemies.
What's he talking about? So maybe put another way, it's the economy versus all the other issues. It's the economy even versus Donald Trump's personality and the mean tweets. It's the economy versus climate, the economy versus trans rights, the economy versus abortion, the economy versus race relations. Looking at these pictures, it's hard to understand how the economy doesn't win every time. That is, unless Donald Trump says or does something, which is always a possibility, to screw it up. With us now, NewsNation contributor A. Scott Bolden and Corey Lewandowski, former campaign manager to Donald Trump and New York Times bestselling author. Gentlemen, it is good to see both of you. Speaking of screwing it up, or at least changing the conversation to things that do not matter and are sort of bizarre, would be, Corey, Donald Trump starting over the past couple of days to say that there was an assassination plot by Joe Biden and the Biden administration against him. Here is Eric Erickson, by all accounts a conservative. Hey, Republicans, you're outraged over the wrong thing. While everyone on the right is distracted by a manufactured story, the truly outrageous story of the day is getting almost no attention. And we see it happen over and over and over again, that Donald Trump obsesses over something, and he does it on the stump, and then the media takes that, runs with it, and ignores all the other issues that Republicans could talk about. Why does this keep happening?
Well, Leland, look, I think what Donald Trump was talking about, because it was just uncovered, was Merrick Garland was on Capitol Hill testifying in front of the Senate that when the warrant was issued to search Mar-a-Lago, they authorized the use of deadly force. To most people, that is so preposterous that a former president's home is not only being searched.
Corey, it's not though. Okay, the fact of the matter is every time an FBI agent carries the badge in official capacity, deadly force is authorized. It was authorized, by the way, in the Joe Biden raid as well. It is a non-story. It is silly. It makes Donald Trump look silly. It makes Republicans who are talking about it look silly when there's lots of things to talk about that are meaningful to American people. I don't get it.
There are, and you're right, Leland. I agree with you that if this election is about the economy, Donald Trump wins. If it's about abortion, Joe Biden wins. If it's about immigration, Donald Trump wins. So look, I think what Donald Trump should be talking about, and when he's winning, is the cost increases that everybody is feeling. It's not a socioeconomic issue. It's not a race issue. It's not a religious issue. It's every person in America is worse off today economically than they were 4 years ago, and people are longing for the days of Donald Trump's economy to come back. So when Donald Trump is talking about those things, he's winning. When he's talking about the influx of mass immigration into our country, he's winning. When the left is talking about the issue of abortion and allegedly that you won't be allowed to have that in this country anymore because of the Supreme Court decision, they have done such a good job of making that argument that many women in this country believe that to be the truth. It's not the truth. However, that's all the left has as a narrative to run on. And Joe Biden has become more gaffe prone than ever. And I think you're going to see him less and less on the campaign trail as this goes on.
All right, Scott, at least the way Corey lays it out, and I've yet to hear him say something in terms of the issues that the polling disagrees with, that Democrats' best hope is Donald Trump screwing up.
Well, Donald Trump is screwed up already. I mean, he's on trial for 34 felony counts in New York right now and facing other trials. I think the difference in this case is the economy. When you put that list up, economy versus race relations, economy versus immigration, the economy affects all of us.
Right.
And I do agree with Corey that that's the big issue right here. Now, we can put up economic numbers that make all the sense in the world, but there's an emotional gap between those numbers and the people who are experiencing it. And that is across all class lines and all race lines. One, the Democrats need this economy to get well, get better, and get better fast. Two, we need to remind them that Donald Trump owns the abortion issue, and the abortion issue and women's rights issues is huge, and that can be a driving factor because the GOP fails in that regard. And then the immigration. One of the reasons Donald Trump is up in the Bronx right now is because there are a lot of people of color who have come from other countries, did it legally, and I think many of them resent the illegalization or the process of those who came here illegally. Now, there's a path to citizenship. At the same time, those are the issues. Democrats can't run from it.
Those are the issues. Democrats can't run from it. How worried are Democrats? How worried should they be, that Donald Trump is in the Bronx and he's getting, and I know Donald Trump talks about it all the time, but these kind of crowd sizes, and we looked at the video of people streaming in, and it is not white guys. It's black and brown people.
Not worried about that. We are not a monolithic black and brown people. We have black conservatives and brown conservatives. They can come out and see Donald Trump in the Bronx. It's brave on his part, but he's not going to turn New York blue. He's not going to win New York.
He doesn't have to, though.
No, even if he gets 20% of the black and brown vote, he's not turning New York. So it's a waste of time for him to be there.
If he gets 20% of the black and brown vote, though, in Philadelphia and in Detroit and in Milwaukee,
then go to Philadelphia and go to Detroit and show me that. Then I'm really worried.
Okay.
I'm really
all
worried.
Right, Corey,
but I'm not worried about him being in New York. I want him to live and campaign in New York for the rest of the campaign.
All right, Corey, what is the point of this rally, right? You're not going to win New York. You're not going to win New York City. You're certainly not going to win New York State. This is going to come down to Wisconsin, Michigan, Pennsylvania. Why isn't he in one of those states tonight?
Well, Leland, look, the public polling is indicating that 4 years ago, Donald Trump received 12% of the African-American vote, and today he's receiving 23%. By contrast, you look at where Joe Biden was. Remember, when we had a historical black candidate for president, he received 99% of the African-American vote, and that made a whole bunch of sense. And just 8 short years later, Donald Trump is receiving almost 1/4 of the African-American community's vote because of the failures of the Biden administration. And then you look at the Hispanic vote. 4 years ago, Donald Trump received 32% of the vote. Today, he's polling at 46%, and that is an expanding population. This should be raising significant alarm bells to the Biden campaign. We've seen many people on the left talk about it. We've seen James Carville talk about it. If Donald Trump continues to make inroads in these communities, then those razor-thin margins that we've seen in the electoral success and defeat in states like Michigan and Wisconsin fundamentally change. And if Donald Trump goes on to win Wisconsin and Michigan and has the opportunity to win Pennsylvania again, as he did in 2016, there's no path for Joe Biden to be successful. He can win California and New York all he wants, but you got to win in the states.
No, it's you win. Well, you win Pennsylvania. You win Pennsylvania is over. But
tell me something we don't know. He and I can agree on that part. But the reality is that show me 2 or 3 polls consistently that show Hispanics voting for Donald Trump 30% and over 20% of African Americans voting for him in the swing states and outside of the swing states. Then I'll believe in that polling. But when given the choice between Biden and Trump 6 months from now, and given all of the investment on the ground game, it's hard to see that Donald Trump is making inroads. Black and brown people, voters, rather, are mad at Biden for a lot of different reasons.
Scott, maybe,
but that doesn't mean
what
they're
if this
going
is,
to Trump.
But
that
what
means
if
they're going to stay home.
What if this? And if they stay home, it's almost the same effect. What if black and brown Americans are just like every other American? When I can't understand, you've got the Cook Political Report from today. Arizona, Trump up 1, Trump up 3 in Georgia, 2 in Michigan, 9 in Nevada, 7 in North Carolina, 3 in Pennsylvania. That tracks with all of our other pollings. Likelihood cost of living gets under control under Trump versus Biden. Trump wins that by 16 points. Why are Democrats so convinced that everything is going to be fine?
Well, because the numbers for the economy and inflation are trending downward. That's the first thing. Second of all, Donald Trump has huge negatives. What is Donald Trump going to offer black and brown Democratic voters from a party that is anti-human rights, anti-civil rights, anti-gun control rights, anti-abortion?
We started the program off by saying it's the economy versus all of those things. Right? Yes. They're interested. And I think this was where we ended, Corey. Have you seen anything to indicate, because I have not, that Donald Trump has learned over the past 8 years that when he's talking about the economy and he's talking about pocketbook issues and he's talking about the border, he wins. And when he goes off on his rambling, shall we say, side missions, he does not win. And we were listening to him earlier. He was talking about pipes in buildings in New York, and he was talking about owning golf courses that many of you have played at, and the crowd was silent. Okay, so have you seen any indication that this is a more disciplined Donald Trump?
Well, Leland, look, it is a more disciplined Trump. Look, he has been subjected to this witch hunt, and that's why he, by and large, was going to be in New York. I think this rally was planned prior to the decision that they were going to recess early and give the jury the rest of the week off. And so this was planned because he was supposed to be in New York. And as you know, on the Wednesdays when court has not been in session, he has been in Michigan. He has been in Wisconsin. He has been in those battleground states raising money. He was in Texas this week raising money. And so this rally was planned around this sham of a trial where he's being prosecuted in New York and didn't and wouldn't have had the opportunity to get on the airplane had he been forced to sit in court all day today. And that's the reason we're in the Bronx. And look at the crowd. And if anything, even if you're a Joe Biden supporter, you have to give Donald Trump the credit he deserves for being able to have a crowd like this come out. When you're the sitting president of the United States and you were in New Hampshire this week and the crowd was 20 or 30 people, that should be, again, alarm bells across the board if you're a Democrat operative.
Yeah, I was going to say, if Joe Biden all of a sudden showed up, I don't know, in Missoula, Montana or Boise, Idaho, he's not getting anywhere near this crowd, right, Scott?
Well, he's never played the big crowds, but Donald Trump plays the big crowds since 2016, and he lost in 2020. That doesn't mean anything. And listen to what Corey said, that he's on trial in New York, and before they took this deep recess, they scheduled this because he was stuck in New York, and it's not a sham trial. It's a trial.
We'll deal with the trial next week. All right. Okay. Good to see you, my friend. Corey, we always appreciate you joining us. Thank you. Hope sometime to see you in D.C., my friend.
Thank you.
All right, good to see you. All right, so live pictures again. We'll see if Donald Trump mentions Nikki Haley's name. After all, 4 million Republican primary voters voted for her. Will Trump or Biden work harder to win over the middle? That'll be interesting. And the U.S. last fought Chinese forces in the Korean War. That was 70 years ago.
大陆548军舰，这里是中华民国海巡署宜兰舰广播。
How China's mock invasion of Taiwan might once again put American troops in harm's way before the election. 24 hours have seen unprecedented Chinese military action. They have surrounded Taiwan in a way never seen before. They're practicing an invasion of Taiwan, or they may be actually getting ready to invade Taiwan. This is video of the Chinese and Taiwanese Navy quite literally eye to eye. And when militaries get this close, especially militaries that don't like each other, it is how wars start. President Biden says if a war does start, American airmen, sailors, and Marines are going in.
U.S. forces defend the island.
Yes, if in fact there was an unprecedented attack.
Are you willing to get involved militarily to defend Taiwan if it comes to that?
Yes.
You are?
That's the commitment we made.
And both times, people noted what a massive change in U.S. policy it is. What you're seeing on this map is incredibly important because it shows you the depth and breadth of the Chinese drills. They're surrounding Taiwan, and what they're practicing is not only invading Taiwan, but trying to cut off U.S. military aid coming in either from the north, south, or over here from the east, also down from Japan, and proving to the United States that they have the abilities to do it. We'll show you exactly where the U.S. presence on Okinawa. This is in Japan, just about 450 miles from Taiwan. There are also U.S. troops, U.S. Marines on Taiwan, only a couple hundred of them. But you see, the Chinese only have 100 miles to go, and if the U.S. military were to go ahead and back up exactly what, it's amazing the phone calls you get here on the show. People are so interested. They're calling in to ask more about China. It is interesting, though, when you realize that the Chinese have 100 miles to go and the United States 1,300 miles, 1,700 miles, 300 miles from the Philippines to get in and try and resupply the Taiwanese or to begin to fight. Obviously, a large naval presence here around Taiwan as well. But so far, we have not heard the United States get close and try to remind the Chinese that we are there. USS America is an amphibious assault ship. USS Ronald Reagan, carrier battle group, and some other destroyers and cruisers all around. With that, we bring in Ambassador John Bolton, former ambassador to the United Nations, also former national security advisor. Ambassador, is this a drill, or is this sort of a drill that might turn into more?
Well, I think it's intended, obviously, as almost literally a shot across the bow of the newly inaugurated Taiwanese president, and to challenge what they think, what Beijing thinks is a new government in Taiwan that's going to try and push harder to get recognition for an independent Taiwan. So there are political elements here and military elements as well. There's a lot of speculation whether what China is threatening to do is an outright invasion of Taiwan, or if they'll try something else, like creating a pretext for a political dispute and then throwing a blockade around the island to see if the United States, Japan, and others will break the blockade. So I think we're obviously, our strategic thinking in the Pentagon and elsewhere is at full speed now to deal with both the possibility of an invasion and a blockade. We need significantly greater American military assets in the region. We need significantly greater military assets around the world. But in that part of the Pacific, we're woefully inadequate in naval strength. We don't have as many ships at sea as the Navy needs. They don't get built overnight. We need a big increase in naval shipbuilding. But we need to think through at a political military level how to deter China until we can get the wherewithal there that really would protect either against a Chinese invasion or a Chinese blockade.
So if you're Xi Jinping right now and you're looking at the American political situation, which he studies carefully, we know, you see Donald Trump up in the polls. You look at American foreign policy, what we did in Ukraine or are doing in Ukraine, and what we are doing with Israel. Why would you wait and take the risk of Donald Trump being elected president?
Well, I think the Chinese calculus is complicated. I think Xi Jinping thinks he knows how to handle Donald Trump, and that right after the election, if he called him up and said, let's talk about a big trade deal, Trump would likely jump at it. I think what Beijing is focused on is bandwidth at the current time. The administration faces the Russian invasion in Ukraine. It faces Iranian-led chaos across the Middle East, and the election campaign, which obviously will increasingly consume the White House's attention. So they may think there's a period of vulnerability while we're just overextended with crises internationally and affairs domestically, that this may be a time to make a move. But there's one very important factor Xi Jinping also has to take into account. If he launches something against Taiwan, blockade, invasion, whatever, or something in the South China Sea, or something against Vietnam or India on their long land border, he needs to succeed. If he fails, or is seen to fail, or it doesn't go well, that could be regime threatening to him. So in his calculus, he has to be pretty sure that it's going to come out the right way before he acts.
Another group that doesn't often act without having thought things through pretty well is Hamas and their backers in Iran. Just crossing in the past less than an hour or so is a report, it's unconfirmed, but from reliable sources, U.S. service member critically injured and 2 others hurt at the Gaza aid pier. We were, of course, told that U.S. forces would not in any way be in danger. Now, it turns out Hamas has critically injured 1 and 2 others hurt. Does that change things in the Middle East?
Well, I think it could. I mean, look, this pier was offered as the solution to everything, all the humanitarian problems. We've also seen reporting in the past several days that very little of the aid that's been delivered to the pier and actually offloaded onto the shore has gotten out to the Gazan people, and not entirely clear why. But I tell you, you can have a humanitarian mission as the U.S. had in Somalia in 1992 to open corridors for humanitarian assistance during the civil war there. That succeeded, and then when George H.W. Bush left office and the Clinton administration came in, they tried to engage in nation building, and we had Black Hawk Down and many casualties for American service members. So they may be doing humanitarian work, but they were always at risk, and I thought it was a real mistake for the administration to say, no boots on the ground, ha ha, just boots in the water. And now, potentially, if these reports are accurate, and as you say, we don't know, we do have casualties. So this is always risky, and I just think it represents another breakdown in the Biden administration approach to what's happening in the Middle East. This is not just a Gaza conflict. This is an Iranian-led, what they call ring of fire strategy around Israel.
Yeah, and you think about right now the optics that are going on. I don't know if we have live pictures, but President Biden is welcoming the Kenyan president, I believe, for a state dinner right now at the White House, the president of Kenya. And you think about the optics right now of this White House effectively handcuffing Israel in going after Hamas that just seriously wounded a U.S. service member. That is going to be a difficult circle to square at the White House press briefing as we head no less into Memorial Day weekend. Mr. Ambassador, thank you for the time. We appreciate it.
Happy Memorial Day.
Yes, sir. Looking live as President Trump continues his rally in the Bronx. He's trying to peel off black and Latino voters from President Biden. Biden's trying to nab Nikki Haley voters, despite her saying she's voting for Trump. Exactly Donald Trump's plan to get Nikki Haley voters when we come back. Well, this was a change of heart. Nikki Haley is now a no-good, rotten cult-following, tin-foil hat-wearing Nazi, according to much of the pro-Biden media. They evidently are quite upset that Haley said she would vote for Donald Trump.
As she said in the very clip you played, 4 more years of Donald Trump will destroy this country. So she is putting her career and her interests over the country.
We've been saying this. She kind of does that thing when you pull in a fish and the fish is like this trying to get some of it.
You mean like a flip-flop? Like a flip-flop?
Okay, in a funny way, yeah.
Flip-flop, 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 flip-flop.
We need shrinks and cult experts to explain this.
Anger often comes from fear. Haley got 4.3 million votes in the Republican primaries. Anti-Trumpers hoped those people would vote for Joe Biden. Haley saying she's voting for Trump makes that obviously less likely. Lauren Wright is here, associate research scholar, lecturer in politics, public affairs, Princeton University. I don't know if you still have the pictures of Donald Trump rallying in New York, Lauren, but so far I have yet to hear him say the word Nikki Haley or talk to her voters. Does he need to?
Yes, he needs those people. And he frankly doesn't have a lot of choices. He has someone who shot a dog. He has a lot of election deniers. He's got a few normal people on this list. And Nikki Haley would be the best option to get Nikki Haley voters. I don't know if he can set aside the personal stuff and the attacks that she made on him. But yeah, if she wants to be, I think what she's calculating, and I think is the most interesting part, she thinks he's going to win. She's betting he's going to the White House. And if she's part of a White House, then that's better for her career than being nowhere at all. So it actually is important. Yeah.
Yeah, I mean, you're taking this a step further, right? You're saying she says she's going to vote for Donald Trump, so she has a shot at being VP. I would agree with your assessment.
On top of that, you drawing that connection.
Yeah, you can't be fired from being vice president, right? And the calculus is that a lot of swing voters would say Nikki Haley brings some normalcy, she brings some control, she brings some discipline. David Frum in The Atlantic disagrees with both yours and my analysis. Nikki Haley surrendered, but not her voters. Republican primary voters turned to Haley to oppose Trump, and their commitment hasn't changed. Pollsters suggest that about 2/3 of Haley voters prefer Joe Biden to Trump. Do the math. That's 2/3 of 1/5 of all Republicans. That's not a lot of people in total, but that may be more than the margin of national victory in 2024. Okay, so then why, if David Frum's analysis is true and you and I are wrong, is Donald Trump ahead in all the swing state polls?
Well, I don't think any of us knows for sure. I think what Nikki Haley thinks is that Trump's going to win, and that's also what most national and swing state polls show. But it's true that there's not as much overlap among Nikki Haley and Trump voters as there are among other candidate choices. And that's certainly concerning. But when those people come home eventually and choose the Republican nominee, that's a more likely outcome than them switching parties, for instance. But yeah, it's true. Trump is really angering to a lot of these people. He has to work really hard to bring them back into the fold.
When do we see the realization among so many Americans that they have a binary choice between Trump and Biden set in?
I think much closer to the election, but these polls we're seeing aren't meaningless. I mean, these aren't random numbers. They just are going to get much more accurate as we get much closer. And so Democrats, every single week, I see poo-pooing the polls. It doesn't mean anything. No one's paying attention. Well, people are starting to pay closer attention. And what they see from Democrats is scaring them more on average than what they're seeing from Trump, even in a courthouse. They think that's less threatening than what they see around the world and on college campuses. And that's completely understandable. So is the economy.
Yeah, look, you've got our buddy George Will, who describes it as a world out of control, disorder, right? Yes. Disorder on college campuses, disorder in the economy, disorder around the world. And people remember, rightly or wrongly, back to the time of Donald Trump and say, hey, things were a little bit better then. Interestingly enough, though, you've got Kathy Hochul, who is I think, are these live pictures, guys, from the White House, from the state dinner? Looks like they are, or just earlier from the state dinner when they were welcoming the president of Kenya. You've got Kathy Hochul, the governor of New York, as Trump is rallying in New York. Hochul called all of Trump's supporters clowns. Clowns sounds an awful lot like deplorables, sounds an awful lot like people who cling to their guns and religion, on and on. Why are Democrats not seeing, for lack of a better term, that this isn't working, and the alarm bells that nonpartisans like you and I who are observing this say Joe Biden's in real trouble?
Well, in my opinion, they've made a major miscalculation. And they said from day one, when Biden made this big campaign starter speech in Philadelphia and said, this election is about democracy. With me, you have a democracy. With Trump, that you have no more democracy. The country falls apart. And that's their message. It's not your grocery bills. It's not your gas bills. It's not your rent. It's not anything tangible to people on a day-to-day basis. It's something that requires a little bit more fear and imagination about what the future looks like. And that's not how people vote. And so I do think it's a miscalculation on their part. They're just hyper focused on Trump as this really divisive figure, which he is, and he's controversial, and no president's ever been part of a criminal court case before. But people are looking at their checkbooks and their families and trying to decide, who will I be more prosperous and safer under? And right now, they're willing to roll the dice on Donald Trump. What that looks like in 6 months, I don't know, but it's going in that direction. Democrats should be terrified.
Yeah, they should be terrified. If you look at the polling, they're not. In 2020, and to be fair to them, in 2020, Joe Biden was a blank slate. There wasn't anything to compare it against except the mean tweets of Donald Trump. Now there's a lot to compare it against. All right, Lauren, thank you. We'll keep listening to Donald Trump in New York as he goes on. I think it's almost well into an hour that he's on stage. We'll check in a little later. Lauren, thank you. And now to the air. A new Blue Angels movie, there it is really cool. It celebrates the pilots who live wingtip to wingtip at Mach 1, why it's cool to be back in love with American greatness.
Every once in a while, you're in a roll or a rollout. The jets just kind of freeze, and the world around you seems to kind of spin. So, and those are kind of the moments that I'll remember that kind of stick with me.
Stone at Arlington National Cemetery. They will stay there through the weekend. I'll be there this weekend to go visit my fiance's grandfather. Young Americans, though, don't want to or can't join the military these days. Many can't pass the drug tests. Others are overweight. Some just don't have the call of patriotism. The list goes on. Patriotism among young Americans is an all-time low. The Navy, unsurprisingly, missed its recruiting goals by 41,000 sailors last year alone. But things are changing, perhaps, in America. It's once again cool to celebrate America, to serve America, and nothing speaks to America, the excellence of America, like the Navy Blue Angels.
It can be frustrating at times. The challenge is to get the newbies up to speed, and that can be scary. When you're flying 12 inches apart, everybody's lives are in each other's hands.
It's an eye-opener for how inherently dangerous this job is.
Ready, roll, hat.
As if we needed more of a reminder about how dangerous it is. The Blue Angels documentary is out on IMAX and Amazon. Jerry Darren is with us, former Blue Angels pilot, naval officer. Jerry, appreciate you joining us. Okay, the movies are never like real life. What'd they get wrong?
No, they didn't get much wrong, Leland. You hit the nail on the head with your opening comments. There's a lot wrong with America. I think that's probably the most bipartisan statement anyone could make. But there's a lot right with America, and there's nothing more right than the Blue Angels. And so the movie really encapsulated that. The Blue Angels represent the pride, the professionalism, the teamwork, the relentless pursuit for the unattainable perfection. And it will get your heart pounding, and your patriotism level will hit a new high. It's awesome, and I can't encourage people more to go see it, especially on Memorial Day weekend.
Yeah, and it's one of those that's seen in IMAX, and getting the full view of it's going to be way different than seeing it at home. What do you make, though, of this renewed interest, sort of in the idea, and I picked up on what you said, sort of the relentless pursuit of perfection, which is something that's kind of gone out of vogue for a while, right?
It has. I think America has gotten a little bit complacent from a number of levels. I don't know if you put the blame on COVID. I don't know if you put the blame on, just 20 years of fatigue of being in the desert. But look, I think, the brightest days for our country are ahead of us, and it's all going to start with American youth. And again, the Blue Angels inspired me when I was a young kid. And when I saw them fly at probably age 13 or 14, I saw it and it changed my life forever. And I knew right then and there that that's what I wanted to do. And so the hope is that, the Blue Angels continue to do that. I got to say the Navy and Naval Aviation's on a nice roll here with Top Gun Maverick and now the Blue Angels. And it's just representative not just of Naval Aviation, but all of the U.S. military, the pride, the professionalism. And it's just a fantastic way for young men and women to pursue something greater than themselves. And I hope it does inspire a lot of people.
All right, this one's from my producer. 158 active duty sailors and Marines, 1,200 flight hours needed to fly, 3 pilots, that's it, selected annually to come and start training and working with the team. 120 winter training missions must be completed to fly in an air show. You're getting towards perfection, right? But even in a business where perfection is what has to happen, most of the time you get to try it a few times, and if you fail, so be it. With you guys, if you fail, there's a crash. Do you start at 15 feet or 50 feet and then everybody starts working in? How do you get to 6 feet?
Absolutely. Leland, everyone that joins the Blue Angels, from the most junior sailor to the most senior pilot, all have a tremendous amount of experience, all have combat and carrier-based operations behind them. Every new Blue Angel pilot has been a carrier-based fighter pilot that is combat proven. So you're taking a very capable group of pilots, but with that, it's very much a building block approach. Literally the first week, we're just learning how to march out to the airplanes in sync, how to get in the airplane and close the canopies together, how to turn the smoke on and off together. And then we start, to your point, much further apart, about the same distance as we fly in the fleet, but we're trying to perfectly match every turn, every rollout, every power addition, every gear extension, and it's getting the team perfectly in sync and in tune and just going exactly at the same time every time the boss or the flight leader makes a call. And that just takes a lot of time, 120 flights to your point. And that's just to get to the first show. And then the bar continues to get raised as the season progresses.
Now you have me thinking about my golf swing in perfection. The relentless pursuit in all things. Jerry, good to see you. Thank you very much. We appreciate it.
Here, Lynn.
Yeah. Flaggate continues. Have you seen this? A new picture. So Supreme Court Justice Samuel Alito flew a Revolutionary War flag at his beach house in New Jersey, while the left is losing their mind over it. And to be fair, they might have a point. If you look over my shoulder and take a close look at this flag, the flag is called the Appeal to Heaven flag. It dates back to the Revolution. George Washington had the flag designed as commander-in-chief of the Continental Army. The New York Times noted it also flew, among other flags, at the beach house of Supreme Court Justice Samuel Alito. That's the picture on the left. In recent times, it was used, although not exclusively, obviously, by some right-wing groups. Some brought it with them to the January 6 riots. If you look closely in the crowd, you'll see it. And this isn't the first dust-up this month with Alito and flags. Flaggate began last week when the New York Times reported the American flag flew upside down at his home for a few days in 2021 after the January 6 riots. Alito said his wife made the move over a dispute with the neighbor to show distress. Former federal prosecutor Shan Wu, former Deputy Assistant Attorney General under George W. Bush, Tom Dupree, is with us. Gentlemen, it is good to see you. Two esteemed men to discuss. Thank you. Shan Wu, to you first. What does it matter what flags are over the Supreme Court houses?
Matters because the symbolism of the flag, and this could be debated, but the symbolism is thought to be with the Stop the Steal, with the rioters who brought the flag in. And since Alito is sitting on cases involving those matters, it raises the question of, does he have some kind of partisanship? Does he have a bias towards it?
Is it time, Tom, to maybe decide that everybody on the Supreme Court's got some partisanship and bias?
Well, I don't think you're ever going to have any court that is entirely free of partisanship and bias. I think that is part of the nature of the human condition. And look, in this case, I think what's particularly complex here is that this flag is associated with all sorts of different things. It was used in the Revolutionary War, but more modernly, to Shan's point, it has been used in connection with January 6th. And so I think people look at it, and certainly no surprise that Justice Alito's critics look at it, and they take the most extreme interpretation of it and attribute it to him, which doesn't strike me as totally fair.
Right, but to be fair, you're dealing with somebody who is incredibly smart and incredibly well learned and incredibly well attuned to the affairs of the government of the United States. You might think that they would be aware of the symbolism. I see you smiling along there. But look, for people who think institutions are so important, I think nobody thinks anything's more important than the Supreme Court and its legitimacy. Justice Sonia Sotomayor, $3.7 million from the memoir of, and her children's book since joining the court in 2009, and her staff prodded colleges and libraries to buy the books. Shan, is there a chance that there is, shall we say, undue focus on one side of justices and not enough on another?
I think there's a lack of proper focus on the whole court's accountability, whether it's the so-called liberal wing or the conservative wing. I think two members of the conservative wing have become very blatant and seem not to care about the public opinion, so it focuses a lot of scrutiny on them. But overall, the problem with the court, Leland, is there's no mechanism to hold them accountable. There's no way to actually scrutinize them, and that's a huge problem, I think, for the legitimacy of the institution.
Yeah, Tom, I guess impeachment's the only option, right? Is it time, and nobody likes doing this, for a court to set rules that actually have to be followed, or for Congress to set rules on the court?
Well, I don't think Congress needs to do it. The Supreme Court a few months ago actually adopted its own code of conduct because it had come under public criticism for not having one, and they adopted it. But it is self-enforcing. I don't think you could have a mechanism in our constitutional structure where you would have a body above the Supreme Court that could disqualify them, or you would have Congress, which is a separate branch of our government, establishing the rules by which the Supreme Court conducts its own operations. I think there would be constitutional problems with that, and I think at the end of the day, you're basically left with the Supreme Court adopting its own code of conduct and then trusting the justices to enforce it.
But the problem with that is it really makes them supreme beings, not Supreme Court justices, because if they raise the point, or supporters like that raise the point, any attempt to police them besides themselves creates a constitutional crisis. That means they can't be governed at all, and I think that's a big problem. There are ways to govern them. Congress can make them testify, talk about their potential conflicts, disclose their finances, and DOJ can even open investigations into them. But I think both of those branches are afraid to do that.
All right, you got the last word this time. You get the first word next time. Gentlemen, thank you very much. It is good to see both of you. Great piece, by the way, in the Daily Beast. Thanks for sending it along. Supreme Court will matter an awful lot over the coming months. They may be the ones who decide the election, after all. It's happened before. Here's Chris.
Hey, everybody, I'm Chris Cuomo. We're heading into a very important tradition weekend. In fact, I'm taking tomorrow night off, and I'm taking Monday night off. Why? Because tradition matters. Tradition matters. And Memorial Day matters. Just for everybody at home, remember, there's a difference between Memorial Day and Veterans Day, right? Memorial Day are those who gave their lives in service to this country. Veterans Day is for everybody who's served, whether they died or not in service. The sacrifice is still profound.